All right, everyone. I feel sorry for the people of Venezuela. Once again, as I have for years now, well, in the sense before I was born, really. Really long suffering. Now it looks like Venezuela's about to default on its debt, which is going to cause, you realize the kind of problems that are going to be caused there? Here's the problem. It starts with Chavez. We've got to remember when we're analyzing Venezuela, number one, all this bullshit about some CIA coup has nothing to do with the oil price glut. That's what's actually causing their problems mostly. Had nothing to do with an embargo. That was in place before they had any problems. Their economy was growing swiftly. It's because of the oil prices being high. Number two, you can't solely blame Maduro. You can blame him for being dumb enough to continue Chavez policies. You can't blame him for putting in place the sort of central planning, the sort of abuse, the sort of apparently undefended constitution with state-run socialist guerrillas that enables someone like Maduro to be a tyrant in the first place. Chavez is responsible for that. Chavez is responsible for not diversifying the economy when times were good. Maduro only had a couple years, then everything fell to shit, so he's getting the blame. Mostly Chavez's fault, though. He created the structure that Maduro inherited. What happens is this. For some time, Venezuela would print a bunch of money and it would borrow money from all sorts of places wherever it could, and invest in giving people the sort of things they needed for basic human development, like an AC, plumbing, and something. That's all great. The problem is if you're not also investing anything in diversifying your economy and you're relying on one specific export, which is crude oil, and then the crude oil price collapses, you are no longer capable of making the debt payments. See, you're propping up your whole economy in a manner that you can no longer prop it up with. It's impossible. You don't have anything else to export that can make up the difference. Right now, you'd have to have some random Venezuelan plant or crop that they just happen to really, really like that makes up at least some proportion, a few percents of the economy go through the roof in value to make up the difference, or you need an incline in the oil prices. You're not going to get an incline in the oil prices. Look, the problem is this. The oil prices have remained stable at their low point for a couple years now. It's a problem for a state like Venezuela. It's also a problem for the Middle East. Why do you think they're investing in diversification? They stored up all of that shit. Instead of giving people microwaves and ACs like the Venezuelan government did, they took a lot of that wealth, put it aside. They also invested in foreign shores that they knew those economies have nothing to do with oil, so they're still making money hand over fist. They can weather the storm. They also have more power when it comes to decisions regarding the oil markets, despite the fact that Venezuela has more oil than Saudi Arabia, I think 2 times over. That's a little bit weird. But they had diversified. There are also some of the smaller countries, the oil countries, are looking to become like a tax haven, a tourist haven, something like that if they're smaller. I think Qatar is trying to do both. Saudi Arabia, it's investing in high-tech, weapons development, a few of these other things, and they've got the money to do that. The Iranians, Iran, they have other exports. They can sell textiles. They can do all sorts. Turkey, which was never really. They have a lot of oil, not relative to the other states, but it was an export. They've got a million other things that they export too. They got a million things going on. The Venezuelan economy, I think it was like what was it, 85 to 92% just oil, somewhere in that general range. Well, then, if the price of oil declines by, 3 times, there goes more than half your economy. There's the problem. So they can't make their debt payments. The borrowing that they did when times were good, so they could just pay it back over time. They borrowed, and then they make the interest payments because they were trying to pump their economy full of growth. It worked for many years, and that's great. They never used any of that growth for anything other than, hey, we're going to keep extracting the oil and give people things that don't ultimately add to the economy. There's a consumer economy, but there's no extra production. What then happens when you have less purchasing power? How do you continue bringing in even stuff like sugar? They've got a sugar shortage. They can't even make Coca-Cola. They have a huge-ass Coca-Cola factory. They can't even make the fucking cola because they can't even buy the sugar necessary to make it. There's your problem. They never diversified the economy. I feel very sorry for the people of Venezuela. They shouldn't have to deal with this bullshit. They had over a decade of unmitigated growth. Like they would put China to shame with so much money pouring in that if they hadn't had central planning and it had been a capitalistic economy, more or less, they'd be fine. It would have diversified somewhat on its own because a service, all the other industries would have propped up to support oil, essentially. If they had had intelligent central planning, it would have been fine. Like someone had said, hey, oil prices might not remain at, what was it, 130, 140 a barrel. Maybe we should take some of this money instead of just borrowing it all and put it towards something else. Look, we can still give everyone huge amounts of welfare, but let's make more infrastructure and make a secondary, like agricultural economy or something, so that if, at least we wouldn't starve in the event of a breakdown in the oil prices. They never bothered to do that. Hugo Chavez didn't diversify shit. Nicolas Maduro, he inherited the economy that was going along really fine. He's a bus driver. He doesn't understand anything beyond the most basic rudiments of productivity. He doesn't understand the history of the problem with central planning when there's no intelligence at planning things. Soviet Union had this problem. Oh, we're going to give these people homes. We're going to, we accidentally built it in a swamp. 10 years later, the homes are dilapidated. And to build this nuclear plant, whoops, we forgot one valve that's going to cause it to eventually melt down. Oh, we're gonna build this big factory. Oh shit, now we have to build a railroad through 2 different mountains in order to get it here. Oh, that's okay. We can throw basically state slave labor at it, but it's not efficient. There's the problem. Too much inefficiency. Now, a capitalistic economy can have the same problem, including in an unfettered free market. But it's capable of eventually correcting itself. With central planning, you need someone to make the decision to correct things. The problem is, the socialist government there is at the whim of the people still, in the sense of, hey, we got to maintain the basics of stability and order. If they were to say, okay, well, the solution to our problem is we're going to stop giving all of you people all of the subsidies we've been giving you, there's no free market to actually supply the goods that they're going to need in the meantime, because they're all going to starve. You actually can't abandon the interventionist socialist system that you've built without a total collapse. The people of Venezuela need to be aware there are 2 ways out of this. One is a revolution, the other is the oil prices magically climb by at least 100%. The latter is probably not going to happen, and here's why. The US now has a shit ton of oil. We've got more oil than the Saudis now. We're becoming less reliant, by the way, on imports of fuel anyway. The Europeans are adopting green energy. China's adopting green energy, so-called. India's now investing in solar and wind. The U.S., even with zero investment into these things, we got enough oil alone to last another couple hundred years. That doesn't even take into consideration all the natural gas we're producing. And what's happened is that some of that's not being extracted right now. Because the oil prices are so low, nobody wants to do the drilling necessary to bother to extract. They'd flood the market and drive the price down so low they wouldn't be able to make a profit. Which would, by the way, destroy Venezuela if they ever did that. So I think the restraint of oil corporations saving a bunch of socialists in Latin America is pretty funny. The problem is this. They'll start pumping it if the oil price goes up, which will stabilize it and keep it low. There's nothing that you can do to stop this from happening. For the next 100 years, you're probably going to have this problem. All of the oil states will have that problem. Those that are capable of diversifying and willing to take steps to do so, yeah, they probably do. In the long term, they'll survive. A state like Venezuela, where it's still 85% nothing but oil, what the fuck are you supposed to do to make your debt payments? You're going to, and Maduro's talking about, oh, we're going to restructure our debt. It's not going to do anything. You're still not going to be, if the oil price doesn't rise, it doesn't matter how forgiving people are to you. They're not going to forgive. How much debt does Venezuela have? I don't even want to dream of the amount of money we're talking about. You can't even re-import your own high demarked currency anymore because it costs too much in terms of plane maintenance and fuel to actually be worth your effort to bring in literal bales of money into the country of Venezuela. It's going to go into hyperinflation. There's probably going to be a revolution there. And people will suffer regardless. My advice to the U.S. government and every other government in the West is when they do, if they do, which is likely, they'll have a collapse. Don't get involved and then let the people of Venezuela sort it out themselves. Get involved afterwards and be as generous as you possibly can. Write off as much debt as you can. Restructure them, invest. Get as many businesses in there as possible, as much U.S. investment, because then we can do some real good. It would really, really help to restore stability to that part of the world if we just were generous for once, instead of going in and trying to screw them with, oh, you will give you lots and lots of loans, you don't have to pay them back in the next 10 years, we're going to screw you in the meantime. Yeah, great way to build up alliances. No, that's a great way to see the return of socialism there, which does the same thing all over again. Won't work. That's about all. Peace out.